Good morning. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the final session of the five-part negotiation webinar series, hosted in partnership by Manitoba Agriculture and Supply Chain Canada. Today's topic is an essential part of negotiation: active listening. I'm Annette Allen, Business Development Specialist with Manitoba Agriculture's Value Added Branch, and I will be your moderator today. I will kick off this webinar with a land acknowledgement. We recognize that Manitoba is on the treaty territories and ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe, Anishinaabe, Dakota Oyate, Denesalin, and Nehethawak peoples. We acknowledge Manitoba is located on the homeland of the Red River Métis. We acknowledge Northern Manitoba includes lands that are the ancestral lands of the Inuit. We respect the spirit and intent of treaties and treaty making and remain committed to working in partnership with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people in the spirit of truth, reconciliation, and collaboration. I would like to welcome back our presenter of this negotiation power series, Mr. Rick Reed. Rick is the CEO for the Manitoba Institute of Supply Chain Canada. Rick has over 25 years of supply chain experience in both the public and private sectors. He specializes in optimizing supply chains and has helped organizations develop strategies to maximize their efficiency and profitability. Welcome back, Rick.
Thank you, Annette. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us again for our last session. For those that have participated in the other ones, we've talked a lot about the technical aspects of negotiation. Primarily, we've talked about the importance of preparation, understanding the problem from all angles, understanding potential alternatives or solutions, taking a look at understanding, yourself. What is it that you need from this negotiation? What would you like to get from this negotiation? Identifying your BATNA. What is your alternative if you can't come to an agreement? So that you know when to walk away or when to say yes. It's also same analyzing the other party. Is what is it? What is their viewpoint? How are they looking at this? What's their needs? What do they want from it? What do they need from it, or what would they like to get from this negotiation? What is their BATNA potentially? So what's the threshold you need to meet, and about how the situation, impacts the negotiation itself. I mean, we have a situation currently right now where we have a war in Iran that's all of a sudden changed things up in terms of fuel prices and fertilizer prices and a bunch of things. And it's put, it'll have put a lot of pressure on, people, particularly even from this industry that, that you guys are from, is, well, all of a sudden my costs are going up a bunch and now what am I going to do? And that situation puts pressure under people where they're going to make decisions differently. And understanding how that relates to a negotiation is important in terms of coming to a positive or a negative outcome. So we've talked a lot about preparation and kind of the steps you need to do to be ready and understand and be able to go in. We've talked a little bit about tactics in the room, how power elements, affect it. But today I want to talk about active listening, communication, active listening. They're all part of the same thing. And its importance, because you can do all the preparation that you want to, that we've talked about in 4 sessions. But unless you have, 100%, facts sitting in front of you where you know that has to be true, you only have assumptions or opinions. And part of going through the negotiation is you've based your strategy around, I believe this to be true, these facts to be true. I believe this is their BATNA. I believe this is what they want. I believe this is what they need. And sometimes you have definitive proof that that's the case, but more often than not, it's a gut feel or it's an educated guess. And what you need to do as you're going through the negotiation, you have to find a way to guide that conversation in a way that does a whole bunch of things. And part of that is gather information, confirm the things you think to be true. It's also going to be to build trust, is to build a connection so that you can get that person. So number one, you can make sure that the facts you believe to be true are true, and that you built enough trust in a relationship or a connection with that person that you can get them to yes. And that's what we're going to talk about today is once you're into the room and you're doing it, the skills you can use, they're going to help get you there. So takeaways from today, pretty straightforward. It's an understanding of what interpersonal communication skills are. We're going to talk about active listening and the key components of that. Just talk about how you can become a better listener, how body language is critical and how you can use it to your advantage. And then just how to have a positive mindset. Um, and we'll talk about how you can go into it because usually it's how you go into it is going to have a big bearing on the outcome of your negotiation. Interpersonal communication skills. So interpersonal communication skills is essentially what it says. It's a skill that's going to let you communicate ideas, exchange information. Sometimes it's verbal, sometimes it's not verbal, sometimes it's written. It's a combination of a bunch of things. And all of it rolls up into how people perceive you. And that's kind of what I was talking about in my opening, is it's that perception is what's going to determine, or a big part in determining whether that person wants to make a connection with you, whether that person trusts you, whether that person is going to be open to what it is that you're trying to communicate or you're trying to persuade them to do or negotiate from them. Active listening is a piece of communication. It's part of the overall communication lexicon that enhances your ability to do just that. It's communication isn't just about people just spouting out words. It's about whether or not the message is actually received. The message that I intended to send is actually received and understood by the other party. And as we all know, like you talk to people and you have a conversation. Well, I didn't say it that way. That's not what I said, or this and that. Like that's communication isn't precise, not as precise as some people think. And that's where improving your active listening skills can have a big impact on your ability to get better results. So communication, when you look at this, it's a bunch of things. It's the words we use. I go a little bit further. I like to, when I'm in a negotiation or a discussion, a business discussion, it's usually three things. I'm listening to the words that are being said. I'm listening to how it's being said. And more importantly, I'm listening to what's not being said. Because it's a real tell as to what's going on. If people are talking about something that seems obvious, then the question is, why are they not talking about it? And there's something that I need to be digging into. If they're putting spin on something, as to how it's being said, why are they putting that spin on? What is it that I don't know? What are they trying to hide? What do I need to go find out? And which leads me to, I need to go dig into that. And of course the words, but the words we use, and the tone of voice and how we're doing it have a big impact. We've all had that where, you have a situation, you go, this person's, I'm talking, but they're not listening. Facial expressions is another one, which kind of ties, into the body language, is that you can tell a lot. That's why negotiations, I feel are more successful when you're actually in the room with somebody. Because when you're doing it either on the phone or you're doing it through emails or you're doing it even just like this, on a Teams call, you miss a whole bunch of information. You miss a whole bunch of those um, touch points and stuff that can help you get to a better outcome. So again, when I talk about words, I was talking about things, it's what's being said, how it's being said, or what isn't. But generally, words, like you look at we, when you talk about doing your work, like I always encourage people when they're talking about work that they've done, when they're sharing from their workplace, talk about, well, we did this, we had this problem, this is what we did, and this is what we did, as opposed to right? It's a little thing, but it makes a big difference. It kind of takes it's all about me to, yeah, this is a team. And it's helpful in that sense. Please and thanks yous, being polite, again, must and never, oh, we're never going to do that. Well, never is a long time. And circumstances change. And what is a situation where it might? Um, lots of swearing. I like the word "but" on there is, I've also heard that is, when people do that, as soon as somebody uses the word "but," everything they said just prior to that means nothing. It was it was just fluff that they were saying, but, and then the real issue comes out. So using a word perhaps like "however," is something that's a little more helpful than using "but." But words, again, just some examples. Talked about tone of voice. We've all had that. I mean, we probably all remember it as kids. We probably all done it. If you're parents, you've probably done it, to your kids, is that, you're in a rush and you got 8,000 things going in your head and your kids are saying, well, how can I have a snack? And you're not really exactly, giving them the time of day. You're not even looking at them. You're just kind of, well, just no, no, wait, I said this, and you're kind of being dismissive. Um, and I'm not criticizing anybody's parenting skills because we've all done it, but just to give you an example of something that we get distracted, and if we're frustrated or we're angry or whatever it happens to be, and all of a sudden somebody comes at us out of the blue, with something, all of a sudden we're not necessarily speaking to them the way we would usually do it, right? So again, it's just some examples of how the tone of voice can have an impact on things. Facial expressions. Eye contact, probably the most critical one, is if you want to make a connection with somebody, eye contact is critical because you can't connect if people eyes are, the eyes are the, door to the soul, or I can't remember what the saying is, but eye contact is critical. You can't make a connection if you're talking to the back of somebody's head or you're looking at their forehead because they're looking down all the time. So facial expressions, they can be, and having a bit of a smile and smiling with your eyes and listening intently, makes a big difference when you're talking to somebody. It goes a long ways to helping start to make a connection and start to build trust. And those are critical in a negotiation. And as you can see, there's lots of examples of things that aren't exactly helpful. And then body language, it's are you leaning in? Are you leaning back? Are you have your arms crossed? Are your feet turned away from the person? That's usually a good way to kind of tell. And it's not just the one thing, but it's a combination of things. But if I have somebody that's I'm talking to and their hips are turned, away from me and they're turned away towards the door and they're not really making eye contact with me and they're looking down or their arms are crossed and that like there's a bunch of things that they're telling me right off the bat that there's an issue, and trying to go make a sale or trying to go negotiate, without dealing with that issue isn't going to be a lot. It's not possible. Like you'll need to deal with the issue. There's an issue with the relationship. There's an issue with trust, and so you need to go dig into it. You need to resolve it because if you don't resolve it, you're not going to get to a successful outcome in your negotiation. So it's a combination. Body language is tricky. It's more than just the things that are on here. It's a combination of all of these things, that I've just went over. It comes down to, are you going to pick up on the cues and address them? Or are you going to try to run right over them and get to a yes? And if you try that, you're probably going to have less than desirable outcome. Whereas if you stop and deal with your issues, you're setting yourself for mutually beneficial long-term relationship that can help you negotiate in the current moment and beyond. So it kind of gave you an overview of the 100,000-foot level is, what communication is to a degree, and the importance of how there's a bunch of pieces that come into how people perceive you and how they're going to determine whether or not they want to have a relationship with you, whether they want to do business with you, whether they want to say yes. whether they trust you. So active listening, what is active listening, in this context? Well, active listening is exactly that. You're trying to understand as much as you can from the speaker's point of view. You're not, it's not a data dump from you. It's selective sharing on your part to encourage them to share on their part. So you understand what it is, where they're coming from, what's their hot button issue, what has to be dealt with in order to them to say yes. Um, how do I make sure that I'm aware of all the details, that there's nothing that's going to surprise me, down the road. It's not the same as hearing. Yeah, I hear, you're hearing me, but you're not listening. So it's one thing to hear words, but if you're not actually taking and processing the message and coming back, that's not active listening. And it's an attitude, as I said, it leads to shared understanding because it is. It really is an attitude. It's an acquisitiveness. It's a curiosity. It's a genuine interest in the other party. And so you ask questions so you understand. And the more you understand, the more you're able to, make an offer, or you can bring a proposal forward that's going to be to their liking, that's going to satisfy what you need, but it's also going to be to their liking, where they're more than likely to say, yes, yeah, I can go, I can agree to that. Because you've taken the time to understand the problem from their point of view, and you framed your offer in a way that meets your needs, right? Gets you what you need, gets you a lot of what you'd like to have, but also does the same for them. And the better you're doing that, right, the more successful your outcomes will be. If you're interested in long-term beneficial agreements. But active listening, it's respond to feelings, is that yes, you're going to respond to that. You're going to get, as you're talking to people, when you start asking these questions, the first thing that's going to come out of their mouth is going to be the important issues to them. And there will be emotional attachment to it sometimes. It'll be important to people sometimes. And you need to be able to acknowledge that. And, it can help you, right? Especially if you can find a way to frame what you're offering in a way that satisfies that or addresses that feeling. But it can also be frustrating to deal with because, again, emotions aren't exactly rational all the time. Reading cues. Once again, this is where it's really important. Personally, well, I believe that negotiations are best, face to face, because you have the full picture that you can actually take a look at. Like right now, you're taking a look at me. If we were negotiating, you can't see my feet. And if I'm sitting there and my leg is bouncing because I'm nervous, or what you're talking about is making me anxious, and I can't control my foot from tapping or my leg from bouncing under the table, then you can't pick up on that. Hey, what's going on, right? Because you might, oh yeah, cool as a cucumber, we're doing this, but whereas I might be like freaking out, right? And I'm pretty good at controlling this. Most people are, but as you move away from your head, people are less and less able to keep control of that, and you can pick up on those cues. And again, that's the physical indicators. Like I said, the tapping foot, the drumming of the fingers, it could be something like that. It could be just playing with their hair. It could be a whole bunch of things. Could be, the questions they ask, summarizing statements. You can do that. You can come back and you can summarize, this is what I heard. Is this correct? The questions that you ask can also, pull out information so you can confirm things you think to be true. You can pull out new information that may change what you're going to do. But that's what active listening is about. Now, if you're going to be a better active listener, and we usually do some exercises on this, but hopefully when we run this thing in person, we can get some of you guys to come on out, or we can, next time we run it as a true seminar, we can get you doing some of these. But some of the tips is you want to make a conscious decision to listen. You have to go into these discussions with a real focus on, I'm going to talk less and listen more. And because your goal is to gather information, to make sure that you add to the preparation you've done and that you get to the right outcome. And it's what you don't know that's really going to come back and hurt you. And so your job when you're going into this isn't just to get an agreement. It's as you're going through the process, it's to keep gathering information, confirming facts, and making sure that you're on track so that you know when you have to adjust and when not. And the only way you can do that is to make a conscious effort to talk less and listen more. And that's hard. It's, you might have a style where you're used to doing that a lot. It's human nature, a lot of the ways to explain a lot of things. But the real key is that for successful negotiation, it's really good to get the other person talking more than you because they're sharing more than you are. And that fact alone gives you more control over how you can guide that negotiation to a successful outcome. Don't interrupt people. This is coming back to just manners. It's talked about behaviors that I said early on, but nobody likes being interrupted. Nobody likes being talked over. So again, if you find it yourself, and I'm guilty of that sometimes. Sometimes I'm just right, and I need to make a conscious, shut up. Just because people don't like being interrupted, it's rude, and you get talking over people. And if you're a guy, um, it's something you got to be careful of if you're negotiating with a woman because whether you mean it or not, it could be can be construed as mansplaining. You might be damaging your whole ability to uh, being able to build trust and have a business relationship here because well you're trying to talk over her. So you need to be careful about that and because it can really set you off on the wrong foot. Keep your eyes focused on the speaker. As I said, eye contact. Eye contact drill. When somebody's talking, make eye contact. Try not to blink too much either. But the idea is eye contact's critical because it shows interest in them. It shows interest in what they're saying. And looking around or looking at this or whatever it is, that doesn't help. You're trying to make a connection. You're trying to connect with these people. You're trying to show them that you are trustworthy, that yes, you're interested in their success and that you can help them get to that and that we can come to an agreement. And so eye contact is very, very critical. But that doesn't mean you don't do, 100%, doesn't mean you can't take notes. But the idea is, take notes. Have your, do a, after you're done conversation, do that follow-up email, with them. Have a log where communication log that some people do. If you're going to if you're going throughout the year, for example, if you have a critical supplier, keep a log of your conversations every time you interact with those people. So that what happens is that you can look back as you're coming into a negotiation again, you can look back at your notes about what was discussed, what did they say, what was important to them, what were they asking for? Because what happens is all those things over a period of time give you that foundation to, okay, how do I need to approach this? You know what? They kind of got irritated when I did this one. They were kind of really happy when we did this. So it leads to questions that you can ask going forward. So logging this and not treating it as just, hey, we're in and out and it's gone 2 seconds later, it's information. And if your intent is to have a long-term relationship, business relationship with these people, then you should be keeping track of, those interactions you've had with them because they're tells. They're an idea of what their BATNA might be, their idea of what their priorities might be, their ideas of what their needs might be. It gives you all those things that helps you as you go into a negotiation to frame your offer in a way that's more likely to get a yes than a no. Don't be afraid to ask what the other person wants from the conversation because if it's going to tell you a lot, right? Because the first thing, well, what is it you're wanting? Hey, what is it? Hey, what are you looking for from here? What are you looking for from our conversation today? Well, I want this. Okay, I understand. So why is this important? How does this impact what you're doing going forward? Right off the bat, by asking that question, you're drawing out information. You're not only drawing out what they want to do, but the why. If you understand what it is and why they want it, then you can figure out a way. How do I get it to them? How can I help them get that while at the same time getting me what I want? Right? And it comes back to that trading on wants and needs that we said on the T bar, the T charts that I talked about in our previous sessions. Ask questions throughout the conversation. Yeah, make sure you understand. It does two things. Number one, it confirms that what you heard is true. You heard it correctly. It shows that you're listening to them because it's a good way to start building that rapport. Because by asking questions, say, well, okay, just so I understand, you're saying this, this, and this, right? One, it shows them that you're actually engaged and you're hearing what they're saying, you're listening to what they're saying, which is good. So ask questions throughout. And as I said, you'll find that if somebody who's a good listener, you're going to see people start to reciprocate, right? They will start to ask you the same kind of things. So be ready to share information, right? But that's what preparation is about. It's not so much about just do a data dump. It's about, okay, be ready to share, but just know what you're going to share. And you want to share stuff that helps you move to the outcome that you're looking for. So body language. I talked about body language in the beginning. And communication is made up of a bunch of things. But body language is by percentage the largest one. And this includes facial expression. But this is body language and facial expressions, 55% of communication. The tone of your voice. Is it monotone? Does it have anger in it? Is it positive? Is it, hey, is it bubbly? Like, what is it? And then the words that you use. But as you can see here, when you're looking at this, you're communicating a lot. The question is, when you evaluate yourselves, how much are you giving away? If you know that body language is, worth over half of what you're communicating, what you're putting out there, are you putting out something positive that gets you to a successful outcome, or are you putting out something that's inhibiting your ability to get that? Are you putting out that, yes, I'm open and welcome and I'm trustworthy and we're good to do business with? Or am I putting out those red flags that people are picking up going, ooh, right? And you need to be aware of that. And it's hard to do. I mean, having somebody videotape you, having them sit there and talk to you when, afterwards, somebody you trust talk to you. Even talk to people that, you're negotiating with or you've done business with a long time. It takes a lot of courage to ask, hey, am I doing something that's annoying? Am I doing something that's not helpful here? Am I doing something that annoys you? Or, it's hard to ask for a 360 analysis from people, but you should. You need to be thinking about what is it that I'm putting out there because it all contributes to how people perceive you. Can you be trusted? Should I be going, having a relationship with you? Should we be doing business with you? And should I be agreeing to what you're talking about? Right? So you need to be aware it's a bunch of things and it all fits together. Again,
Rick,
body
just to
language.
interrupt, you do have a Teams
Oh,
message there showing.
yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, somebody else wants me to go talk about education. But body language, again, are you leaning into the conversation? When you're talking to somebody, am I leaning forward? Am I leaning forward on the table and leaning on the table and am I leaning forward to the person? Or am I sitting back and, looking all sour? Am I not even looking at them? Am I, tapping the table? Am I showing that I'm annoyed? Am I showing that geez, I really want to be somewhere else? So the question is body contact starts and positive body language, people will see it, they'll perceive it before you even say a word. Before you say even the first word, they can hear the tone of your voice, before they hear the first words out of your mouth, they're going to see your body language. And right off the bat, they're going to make an inference from your body language. Is this going to be fun? Is this going to be not fun? Is this going to be, geez, they're going to be a pain in the butt? Are they going to be this and that? Or, geez, boy, that guy's cocky. Or this person, geez, they really seem uncertain. Like they're going to make an inference based on your body language, and I'm not saying you have to go in like all over the top like a car salesman, but the thing is that how you come in, right? And that first impression of what they perceive, and everything from the way you're dressed to the way you handle yourself, the way you talk to people, the way you introduce yourself, all of that is the start. And so if you don't get that right, it doesn't mean you can't recover once you get into, the actual negotiation, but it puts you at a starting point that's a little further back. And that's why you need to be conscious of it. Now, we talked about attitude, that conscious effort, but part of it is understanding empathy and sympathy. And sympathy is exactly that. It's feeling sorry for someone. It doesn't really help you out, but empathy does, right? Understanding where people's coming from, recognizing that what they're feeling is important, and understanding the context is critical. Because if you're trying to build trust with somebody, if you're trying to make a connection with somebody, they have to believe you care about them, right? And at some level, it's important that you do, right? I'm not saying you have to go be best friends and you're going to go hold their hand while they're, going through life's traumas, but you do need to show that you care about them and that their success, that we can come to a mutually beneficial agreement that addresses, these needs and these feelings and what you need out of the agreement and what I do. And going in, we're not showing any empathy, not trying to understand that or recognize it or how it plays into that decision is going to put you behind the 8 ball. And that's part of why when we talk about active listening is when you're looking at this, you're looking at the visual cues you're getting from their body language. You're looking at what they're saying and how they're saying it. You're asking questions to pull out information so you understand. It all plays into, how do I get that person to trust me, and how do I motivate them to say yes? Because they're only going to say yes if they end up, yeah, you know what, I like this person. Yes, I think I can see myself having a business relationship with them. I trust them. I think they're going to come through for me, and yes, this is good for me, and yeah, we can do this. So how can you, emphasize the basically you got to listen more. Again, listen more, talk less. Use open-ended questions: who, what, when, where, why, how. Get them talking, sharing. If when you can, like it says, yeah, agree with them. Don't agree with them just to be for show. But when it's appropriate, yeah, if you agree with their comment, yeah, say, I agree with it. I hear you on that. I agree with that. Let them know you support them. Yeah, no, I support that. I mean, see, I definitely hear, costs going up. Yeah, I definitely agree that they're going up too much and it's a pain in the butt, right? Then, but I just made a mistake. I know exactly how you feel. A better term, I understand how you feel, right? Because, people, it's a very personal thing. So you want to be careful about, just, oh yeah, I know, oh yeah, I know exactly that. And then because it can be perceived as a dismissive thing, as opposed to I understand. Is very frustrating, right? It just changed the context of what you're saying. Establishing a frame of reference is critical. And you can do this either by a statement, or you can often do this with your questions and have them come to it. With your who, what, your questions, because the questions, who, what, when, where, why, how, what you're asking sometimes establish that because it leads them to where you want to go. But instead of me telling them, they come to that conclusion themselves. But a frame of reference is the way we judge people. Like you have people that believe, in self-responsibility. Like basically, you're responsible for your own decisions. They're going to judge other people that are running around complaining that it's everybody else's fault, right? I can't do this. It's not my fault. So and so won't let me do it. Well, what's in your control, right? You have control to make your decision. Why aren't you? So people judge people from the frame of reference that they come from. And that's based on a whole bunch of stuff. It's how you were brought up. It's on your work. It's your life experience. It's a whole bunch of things. But you have to park that. You have to park yourself out of this. And you have to have an open mind. You have to make sure you come back so you understand what it is. It's very scientific in a way, but you have to take yourself out of it. And you have to, be able to suspend that judgment, suspend, kind of those things out of the way so that you can pull out information you can understand. Because that's what the goal is. The goal is to understand and to build a connection with somebody. And if you're being judgy, it's very hard to do that, especially if they perceive that you're being that way. But again, it's like this, it's a whole soup of things, right? Like your frame of reference is made up of a whole bunch of stuff, but basically it's just your life to this point, right? It's how you were raised, it was your experience in school, it's your experience in work, it's life in general, it's the bad girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever it happens to be. It doesn't matter. It's a whole bunch of things that come into this. But you have to realize that just because you have a frame of reference doesn't mean it's the only one. You have to realize that the other party you're negotiating with has one too. And if you're not willing to park yours and actually dig in to understand where they're coming from, right? You're going to have a hard time building that trust in that relationship to get to a successful outcome. You'll get an agreement. I'm not saying you don't get an agreement, but there's a difference between having an agreement and having something that really adds value to both organizations. And this is, part of that. And through this in is, sometimes, one of the big challenges is sometimes people, they make an inference based on very limited data. And, when it comes into that frame of reference, right? Or it comes into the level of preparation or how cocky they are, how confident they are. But, this is an example. Like you have Steve at the presentation, but Steve, is distracted. But he wants more information, but then all of a sudden Steve's being a jerk. He's distracted. He's just being not listening. So he's just asking for more info. But the question is that you're also making an inference, you're jumping on this, but you really, do you necessarily have all the facts? Why is Steve distracted? Right? Is there something else going on? Is it your communication? Is it something you're doing? Is it the room's too cold? Is it he's got a lousy chair, right? That doesn't work? Is it the person beside him's on their, banging away on their, phone and it's annoying him and he can't hear? Like, so why is that case? Is it just because he's not interested in being there? Like it could be a whole bunch of things. But what happens is he asks for more information, but then the inference, well, Steve's being a jerk. He's not listening. Now he asks for more information. I already said that. But what happens is you tune yourself out, right? You rush into a judgment, before you necessarily have the facts. So it's a very simple way of doing it, but I'm just trying to explain it. You have to be careful when you're in a negotiation, about rushing to a judgment on something. Like when you think there's something, ask the questions. Like if he's distracted, why he's distracted? Steve, he starts asking questions. Hey, Steve, I'm happy to answer that, but we did cover that a little bit. Am I not, have I not communicated this well, or have I missed something that's important to you? What is it that I haven't covered that you need to know? So what happens is you got to stop, move forward, and you got to go deal with the issue. And that's what a lot of people don't do, is that they try to plow through from this to the end. They're trying to stay on the plan, but they're missing the signals that there's a roadblock in there. And that you need to stop negotiating. You have to deal with the roadblock, because if you don't deal with the roadblock, you're not going to get to a successful outcome over here. So that's kind of why this slide is in here, is to talk about that, is be careful not to rush to the end or rush to judgment, so you're trying to get to that decision bias, and recognize that these things can be those roadblocks to an agreement that you need to deal with in order to get there. So reframing, well, again, and this is something that when you're looking at it, you have to, you go into this, and this is part of the preparation piece, is that why you analyze yourself, the other party, and the situation is you can go in and you can be really confident that yes, this is what it is, and I'm right, and because I believe I'm the only one, I've got a monopoly on what's right. You need to remember, you're going into a negotiation because you're trying to resolve something. You're trying to resolve a problem that you can't do by yourself, that neither party can do by themselves, and you have to work together to solve the problem. It might be, you know, or their own problems. I need to get a lower price to sell more. This person needs to sell more. Your supplier does. So how do we come up with a way that allows me to get a better price so I can sell more and they can satisfy what they're doing to sell more themselves? So you can go in, you can beat the heck out of them, and you can get into that, this, right? If you are only focused on how you're viewing the situation, and you get into a very distributive kind of mindset, and then you're just banging heads and you're trying to squeeze as much as you can out of them. And it's only as good as they're willing to give you something, and then, you know, they're either going to walk away or you're going to walk away, and the relationship is kind of done. But if you take the time to start looking at it from their point of view, you're going to start to see where those cross section, where those opportunities to do things. Like I can do this that doesn't really cost me much and I don't mind doing it, but I can get this in return for it instead. But if you don't understand the problem from their point of view, you're not going to find those opportunities where you can start trading the like to haves, right, for a need to have. I can, they got a need to have that's on my like, on this list. I can give it away off my like. I can let them have it, but I'm going to get a need that I'm looking for. But you don't do that if you don't look at the problem, really understand it from their point of view. And it's actually a position of power, is that you know your position. What you don't know, you're an expert in your position. They're an expert in their position. And you guys are going back and forth, and you're not always sure what's true and where they're kind of embellishing or whatever it happens to be. But if you take the time to do this, if you take the time to go put yourself and look at it from their point of view, to understand them, and you become, maybe not as good as them, but you become more closer to an expert like they are on their position, you're better able to find a path forward because now you've got yours, you've got a better understanding of theirs, you're in a better position to find that path forward that addresses their needs, right? That gets them as many as they want, gives them many of the likes they want, that does those things that builds trust that gets you to a successful outcome. And it's exactly like I said, check before jumping, check things out before you jump to conclusions. Biggest error many people make. They make an assumption without checking into it. And give people the benefit of the doubt because sometimes they don't know, right? It's just something they threw together because they think they're supposed to. Positive intent. Again, we talked about emotions and everything, right? How emotions are positive, they're infectious when you're in a negotiation. But don't make negative assumptions, right? If you hear something that goes, geez, that doesn't sound right, ask a question, right? Instead of just automatically, oh yeah, they're trying to screw me. Ask a question. And that's what active listening is about. I heard something, geez, that doesn't sound quite right. Well, what do you mean by that? Sounds a little aggressive. That sounds a little aggressive. I'm not sure I like that. What do you mean by that? Like, can you help clarify that for me? And you get them talking about it because again, sometimes just the way somebody says it isn't the way they intend to do it. And that's what active listening is really about. It's about how do I make sure that the message being sent is the one that I'm receiving. Focus on the future. Again, can't dwell on the past. You can only worry about what's going to happen going forward. And just like I said, it's kind of like understanding the other party. Not everybody's like you. They're not got the same beliefs. They're not going to have the same priorities. They're not going to have the same, you know, decision structure as you. I mean, they're not all like you. But empathy is what connects people. If people think you actually genuinely care about them, right? They'll work more with you than if somebody doesn't think if they believe that you do not care, they will reciprocate and they will not, they will behave in a way that reflects that if they don't think you care, and they will become very much defensive. They will share less. They will be harder to get to yes, to agreement. Whereas if they believe that you actually empathize with them, where you understand the situation, where you're doing your best to help them be successful too, they will reciprocate that as well. Okay, maintain focus, right? It's hard to, this is a skill. Like what I'm talking about is a real skill just the fact, and there's an exercise I usually do, is give people, um, basically a couple minutes each. They put them in pairs and I go 2 minutes and 2 minutes, and their job is to ask as many open-ended questions as they can. And it's a lot harder than people think. Because I say it and oh yeah, that's easy, but when you come down to it, it's very hard to do, where you have to keep asking a question, but it has to start with who, what, when, where, why, how. And it starts with what somebody says, and okay, what would I like to know? Ask a question. They say it again. What did they tell me? Good. Ask a question that starts with that. And it's not usual for people to get past, in that couple of minutes, get past 10. It's a very hard habit to get into. And it's the same as showing listening skills, being aware. Okay, am I got eye contact? Am I leaning forward? Am I making sure that my hips are turned toward them so that I'm facing them? They got my full attention. Am I not looking at my watch? Am my phone going off? Am I not picking my phone and look at my phone when I hear a beep? Like it's a lot of those things that are going on. If you're trying to make a connection, you have to show that the connection is important to the other party, and you can't let the other distractions come in. It's like whether it's staff coming in and constantly interrupting your calls. So like I said, it's the phone is the big one, where you're sitting there and all of a sudden you hear the phone, the thing goes off, and they go and they look at their phone and then they put it down. Oh, and then another one comes. This is really important. If you want to do it, stay focused on that person, because it's critical. If you believe that this is a company that's important to you long term and that the relationship's important, give it the attention it deserves. Right? You should do it with all of them anyways, but your strategically critical suppliers that you're dealing with, you're negotiating with, or whatever it is, it's even more imperative that you do that. Be genuine. This is, this is like anything else, is that don't be something you're not. And, like be you. Doesn't mean that, and when I say work on skills, right, whether it be myself, who's very competitive and had to, change my behavior so that I didn't behave so competitively when I was negotiating because it wasn't doing me any good in the long terms. It might be, interrupting people. It might be looking at my phone. Like, I'm not talking about those things where you're changing behaviors to get a better result. I'm talking about just be you. Like if you're don't put on a show for people, because people can see, because you can see through it. I mean, the one thing I really hate about, poor car salespeople is that, they come in like up here and I'm going, there's no way you're that way. Like you're trying to create this huge, upswing. Like it's like when you get the new vehicle and then I have to, we got a big bow in a car and we have to do pictures. And I said, okay, no, like, no. Because it doesn't, are you really that excited about it, or are you just putting on a show to try to make me, you're trying to fluff me up. So like be genuine about who you are. Like don't put on an air, don't try to pretend that you're something that you're not, be positive, because what happens is people can see through that. You might get away with it on one instance, but the longer you're with some, because again, negotiations, the best negotiations are win-win. The best negotiations are thinking long-term, not short-term. And you're going to have more interactions with people. And you might be able to fool them once, but over long-term time, your real character is going to come out. So be genuine. Doesn't mean you don't take things to improve, to take the rough edges off what you're doing, but make sure you're not pretending to be somebody you're not. And have the relationship for what you are, right? And people, if you do that and people see, hey, you're being genuine, you're being truthful, and you got a few warts, everybody does, but you're doing your best to try to minimize what that does, people give you the benefit of the doubt, but they'll see you for who you are. So make sure that you're honest and that you're not trying to act like you're somebody you're not, right? Be genuine. Because people, especially women, generally will see through that quicker. They'll see that pretty quick if you're not being yourself. So we're just going to touch back again on the process and you know, so I've talked about a whole bunch of stuff, but basically communication process, again, what's said, your biases, or filters, if you want to call it that, your body language expressions, all those sort of things. But then it's going to be what the listener has, and it's going to be the same thing. They're going to have their filters or biases, if you want to call it. And there's some examples of what we're talking about. And then what's heard. So what's said and what's heard. And this is a very basic way of kind of looking at it. But another way to maybe look at it is this. And you have what the sender puts out there, and they'll encode it. Basically, the encoding is exactly that. It's going to be, you know, it's going to be about their perceptions. It's going to be about their experience. It's going to be about the immediate need for that negotiation. It's going to be like they're going to put it into a message, in a way that's based around what their life experiences or their needs and that sort of thing. And it's going to come out to a message. So it's good. So the message itself is going to be influenced by their biases, the filters, the life experiences, the needs, the stress they're having at the moment. And it's going to come out in a message. And the message is going to go through a channel. Now, how does it go? Does it go in a person to person, in front of them? Is it a Teams thing like this? Is it in an email? Like what is the channel that this message is being sent? And then it's going to get to the receiver, right? And they're going to do, it's going to go through that and then the receiver, and they're going to decode it based on all the same things: their life experience, their business experience, how they're feeling in the moment, whatever it happens to be, and they're going to decode that message in a way. And the question becomes, is what I intended to send, is that's what's being received when you get through these filters and the noise? Because again, a situation like filters are the things we talked about. Like it's, in the previous slide, noise might be around you, like where the situation where you're on a busy shop floor, or, you've got an issue over here that you're dealing with, and all of a sudden you get this thing coming at you and your mind isn't 100% on it. But the question is that, under this format, right, it's boom, 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 right? But communication is really circular. So the question is that the sender's going to send it out, and it's going to be filtered. It's going to be encoded in some way that they're going to send it out. It's going to be, here's the message. It's going to go through a certain media, channel. It's going to go through a medium channel or a medium or a channel, and then it's going to get deciphered by the person receiving it, based on their things. And then the question is, if it stops there, there's a risk that you end up with a gap where what was said and what was received don't match. But where active listening and communication come in is, that's when you, instead of just having the process stop there, that's when you provide the feedback to the sender. Right? And that's that feedback that confirms whether or not the message that was sent is what was received. So looking at it, instead of a linear process, it's a circular process. Person sends it through a channel, it's received, there's feedback, and then there's confirmation whether what was said was what was actually received. And this is where, it comes into your active listening piece. That's that last piece. It's the feedback piece that is really critical. Because you can have a closed-ended question, right? That feedback often is going to be, in questions. It's going to be in some active listening skills we're going to talk about in a sec. But, you can ask, you have a closed-ended question, something that can generally only be answered with a yes or no, or within a couple of words, like, very, very few words. You can use to start the closing process. So you can get through the whole thing and say, so shall I write up the order? Right? Yeah, let's go. So you can use it. It's a good thing that when you get to the end, when it's time to you feel you've exhausted everything, you think you're there, and it's the question where you're asking, okay, let's in negotiations, let's go to, so shall we write it up? There you go. It's an example of when it's done. It provides confirmation of details. Like, so I'm paying this for this. Yes. All right. Close that question. but it doesn't really gather information. It's more about just confirming details. But open-ended questions, just as you've heard me talk about in the 4 previous sessions and now, is they're going to encourage people to talk. You can't answer an open-ended question with a yes or no. You have to share some information. And that's the critical piece. It's gonna help you get opinions, it's gonna help you get ideas, it's gonna help you get data, facts, et cetera, et cetera. It's gonna help you get understanding as to where the other party's coming from. If you ask the questions correctly, it can help you get consensus because you can ask the question that actually their answer is going to lead them to where you want them to go, right? So it can help you get consensus as well. Good open-ended questions. Again, these are not, there's many of them, but just some examples for you. What's your opinion? How do you think we should solve it? That's the one I like, is that usually when I'm starting a negotiation, and you've heard me say this in the previous sessions, is I usually like to describe the problem from my point of view to start. Hey, this is my problem. I've got to deal with this, and this, and I'm not sure what to do. How can you help me solve this? Right? Or how do you think we should solve this? And what happens is so I just frame the problem, but then I ask for input on how they think that it should be solved or what can be done. And I start with that discussion and I start gathering information right off the bat. So I share information that moves the discussion forward to where I want to go by defining the problem as I see it. And then asking for help in this way is how I start gathering information for them. It's how I start confirming the facts that I believe to be true. It's where I start to figure out, what do they need from this? Because usually the first things can come as soon as I say that, how do you think we should solve it? The first thing out of their mouth is going to be one of their hot button issues. It's human nature. You can't do anything about it. They're going to tell you it's going to be something important right off the bat. So why is this? So why are they asking for that? So then you got to be thinking, okay, so this is, well, how does that fare? Why do you think that works best? Right? How do you think that this solves my issue the best? How is this going to help you if we do it this way? Now you're starting to pull this information in that allows you to start to add to what you already have so that you can come up with an offer. Say, well, why don't we do this way? And you go from there. And it's these are just examples of what you can do, but this is the power of having open-ended questions. Because it allows you to gather so much information and guide the discussion the way you want it to go. These are some other examples, right? I don't have to go through them, but these are other examples. And it's anything. The biggest thing that you have to realize about that is you can jot down these things as you do in your preparation, but it's more about practice. And as I said, it's more about practice of when you hear something said, when you're processing what was said, it's about, okay, what do I still not know? What do I still need to know to go forward? What is not clear about what they just said? And as soon as you're going like, okay, or what hasn't been said, okay, that makes sense. I'm not sure, but okay, I don't know how does this work with this? Right? I hear you there. Thank you for that. But I'm not understand how this works. Like, how is this going to apply to what we're doing? Because again, they shared information, but it wasn't complete. I didn't get everything I needed. So then you turn around and it's a habit thing to all of a sudden click, what didn't they tell me? And to throw a question back at them, who, what, when, where, why, how. Right? As opposed to taking notes and going there. And it's about being conversational. It's about keeping them sharing information, getting that momentum going where they're sharing information. And when you get into that rhythm, you can get an awful lot that helps you, get to a successful outcome. Because the whole time you're, okay, what about that? Well, how about this? Well, how is this going to work? What happens if we have this situation? Because you're going to see whether or not they've got a real plan or whether it's short-sighted, long-sighted. How prepared are they? Usually they're good at one thing, but then because they're focused on what do they need, they haven't really thought about what they'd like to have. Whereas you're going, oh, okay, they're wanting this. What can I give them? But then there's all these likes that I have. I can start getting them to give me other stuff. I'm like, well, how about this? I need this. And you can start getting them to give you more things because they've only thought about the big, I need to have this. And they haven't really thought about the other things that they'd like to have. And what'll happen is that by you getting them to share their position more, right? You can start asking for those things you'd like to have. You can get your needs. You start asking for those things you'd like to have. And they're so focused on getting their need that they're willing to give you some of these things. But you can only do that if you're asking the questions, if you understand what's going on. Verbal probes, again, this is just kind of, a little bit about your questions, but again, tell me more about that, right? And, that's interesting. Tell me more. Really? Really? Why? Like, again, it's questions where, again, you're encouraging to share more. And then this right here, can you give me the problem with that one is it's a closed-ended one. Because if I say no, well, then my question, well, why not? Right? Because then you get it into very quick. So sometimes, if you do that, if you catch yourself, it's okay. But the answer, if it comes back, then make sure you follow up with a who, what, when, or why, how. Nonverbal probes, again, this is back to that facial expressions, body language. If somebody's talking away and they're on the right track, if they're kind of sharing information and they're saying, well, I think we could do this, this, and this, and it's in line with what you're wanting, then just sit there, just kind of nod. Just as they're talking away, just nod. Right? Because it's a verbal cue that they're doing because if they're seeing something like that, it's encouraging them to, yeah, okay, they're all good. Oh, they're liking us. Or then they're going to keep going on that. But frowning, looking down, like, really? Because they're gonna go, oh, what? It gives you an opportunity to break up momentum. They say, well, what's the matter? I said, well, I don't know if you're quite hitting it. And then you can re-anchor and you can say, well, this is a really big issue. It's like, how are we going to deal with this? Because what you're describing, I appreciate it, but it's not really addressing our needs. How are we going to drill this? Like it allows you to re-anchor and kind of get more control of the discussion again. So again, just using these kind of nonverbal things can encourage people to share more because they're looking for those things too. They can pick up on some of that stuff and they're going to realize all of a sudden this isn't Mark. What's going on? And they're going to ask, and there's an opportunity for you to kind of redirect the conversation back to where you want it to go. But active listening, again, 5 ways to probe. These are some active listening techniques. And I've talked a lot about open-ended questions, and I can't speak enough about them. It's your single best way to gather information. And it's not just when you're actually in the negotiation, it's throughout the time. If you're dealing with that supplier throughout the year, using them whenever time you have an interaction with them, whether you're negotiating for something at that point anyways, any opportunity to gather information is good for you. Because the more you understand, the better position you are to help guide a negotiation when it comes time to do it. Silence is huge. It is one of the best tools you can have for probing because if somebody shares, if you're asking questions and they give you an answer back and you don't say anything and you sit there for a good 10, 15 seconds, 15 might be a little long, but you know what? But you sit there for a bit. Silence is unbearable for a lot of people. They really do not like it. And the fact that, if somebody shares something and then you're silent and you maintain that eye contact, more often than not, they're going to start sharing more information. They're going to start talking just so that they feel better and just to relieve the pressure of that because it's a very powerful active listening technique. And my advice to you, as I've said in the previous sessions, is get used to it, get comfortable with silence. So that if somebody tries to use it on you, that you can, use facial expressions, but get used to it because somebody may do it. But the thing is, for you, it can be a very powerful tool because most people aren't prepared for it. And all they want to do is it makes them feel very uncomfortable and they just want to do anything they can to not feel uncomfortable. And the only thing they can do is start talking, which means they're sharing information. And the benefit to you in that case is what they're sharing may not necessarily be what they wanted to share because their head's on the place, I want to stop feeling uncomfortable. So I'm going to say something to fill the space. And what happens is that you can often find yourselves with end up sharing stuff that they weren't necessarily wanting to share with you. So it can be a very powerful tool to use. Reflection, echoing. Basically, that's just where you repeat back exactly what they said to you. So, your cost is going up 20%. My cost is going up 20%. That's all it is. You're doing that. And then what it's going to do is as soon as they say that, then generally the response is they're going to try to justify and they're going to throw a whole bunch of stuff at you, trying to, on top of what they've already said, they're going to try to throw some other stuff to justify, what it is, why they're doing that. And then you can say, well, I'm not sure that's going to, what else can you do? What can we do? If you're going to do that, what else can you do for me that's going to make up for this price increase? So you can, it's an opportunity to gather information and find a way, around or over it or under it. Paraphrasing is exactly what it is. I think we're aware. A summary question is where you follow up, where you summarize, what you heard and you ask a question, right, about it. I've summarized what I heard, but then I've heard, I've listened to what they've said. I've received the message, but there's gaps, and so I summarize what I've heard, and then I ask a question about one of the gaps that I see, and that's a good way to probe as well. Paraphrasing, again, this is pretty straightforward. It's in there, but you're not repeating it. You're not mirroring it back. What you're doing is you're just coming back to what was said in your own words, essentially is what you're doing. So building common ground, like I said at the beginning, all of this stuff is all part of the building blocks to building trust, building rapport, building a connection. It's your preparation so you understand that what you're talking about is in the realm of reality, and you're not going to, people are going, geez, okay, he's coming out of left field. It's about having that good first impression. It's about minding your body language. It's about looking at making sure your facial expressions. It's the words you use. It's the tone of your voice. It's the questions you ask. It's the demonstrating empathy that you actually care. It's a whole bunch of things. And it's a big mix that comes into building that rapport and that trust that's going to get somebody to yes. Because if they don't trust you, if they don't like you in a sense, but more importantly, if they don't trust you, if they don't believe you, then they're not going to give you what you're looking for. And that's what the goal of this is. It's not just to get to the business agreement. It's recognizing that I need to demonstrate that I'm trustworthy. I have to demonstrate that that I empathize, that I actually care about you. I have to demonstrate that, we have a connection, that there's something there. Because if you don't, you're going to be very much into this, and it's going to come down to a power dynamic, and do you have enough leverage to extract what you need or not? And so understanding how you can put this all together, right, in what you're doing is going to help you get to more successful outcomes in negotiations, especially if you're looking at them as a long-term, mutually beneficial, win-win kind of scenario. Speaking of relationships, so common ground, and that's where, common ground is like you have a problem. There's a problem that you have to work on together, and how are you going to get there? And you can either get there by using a big stick if you happen to have all their leverage, where you can maybe leave hard feelings where people aren't necessarily going to help you if you run into a situation going forward, or you can find a way, which is most often the case, where you can find a way that you can find trade-offs. You can expand the pie. You can find a way to split that pie in a way that both sides can walk away happy and in a better position than they were prior to the negotiation. But you do have to work on these things. And as I said, how people are treated, everything I'm talking about is, in a sense, back to the old adage, is treat people well. Because again, the ass is you kick on the way up or the ass is you kiss on the way down. People will forget all sorts of stuff, but they never forget how you made them feel. Right? And that's what this is really if I get it down to the very basics of what we're talking about, that's essentially what I'm trying to encourage you to do. Is you can have a tough negotiation with somebody and both walk away happy and both walk away with a relationship that's positive. Not saying best buddies or go on holidays together, but you can walk away from something like that where there's respect and there's it's positive and friendly and all that sort of thing. if you treat people well. And these are the things I'm talking about. It's everything from going in with the right mindset. It's going in with, minding body language, just portraying what you want to convey. It's about asking questions. It's showing empathy. It's about getting them talking so that you can demonstrate that you care and that you have empathy and you're trying to understand their point of view, that you're legitimately interested in helping them, get to helping both of us get to a win-win outcome to the negotiation, where I'm not trying to fleece them for everything they got, right? Where I'm trying to have something that's fair, come to an agreement that's fair for both of us, that we can both move forward and succeed. That's the part that, is going to get you to a successful outcome in the short term. It's going to get you successful outcomes going, because that's the kind of thing people want to do business with. They don't want to have, where I'm constantly fighting and it's a constant, this tooth and nail all the time like that. If they believe that you're interested in mutually beneficial agreement and they'll come into it, then all of a sudden it opens up the whole realm of possibilities. But as soon as they suspect that that's not your intent, that you're out for yourself and you really don't care about them, they're going to reciprocate in time and they're going to make decisions based on that. That's going to become part of the matrix, their decision matrix of how they deal with you going forward. So that's why I'm focusing on this. This is the tools to build better relationships in your business, right? In your professional career, that allow you to move forward and continue to get good agreements going forward in your career. But building common ground, yeah. Again, these are some examples here. Making fun of making fun of yourself a little bit too. If you did something silly, like showing a little bit of, admitting your own foibles, can also go there. But again, it's about making connection as a person. It doesn't have to be like in the movies where, it's just ruthless, or as our current president would like to show, it's, right is might, or might is right. Sorry. This right here, I'm not going to get into a bunch of this because this is really kind of it's really kind of a psychobabble thing, but it does make sense and I want to mention it. And I've kind of leaned into pieces of it. But basically, neuro linguistic programming is just a concept that talks about, you kind of create what you're looking for. It's either you're half full or half empty kind of scenarios. And one of the best ways that I can, explain it is that, and this is that attitude, a bit of that attitude thing and how it can be infectious, is that what you put out there is what you get back. And, you can, lean forward, you can, use your hands, you can, guys, this is great. You can, show some emotion, you can show positivity, you can, lean into the conversation, you can do these things, or you can sit back, be poker faced and just cross your arms and look at somebody like it's really just about, again, this is kind of the, it kind of fits more into the body language kind of scenario. But are you, away state where you're always tense or you're negative about this and you're kind of the half empty, kind of person, or are you a toward state where you're half full and hey, there's a positive, there's an opportunity here, let's work together and we can do this thing together, and all the things that come with it. So that's really what, the best way I can explain what that is. But basically, if you match your environment, around what's going on, it's easier to build rapport. And the reason being is, it's back to that reality test that people have, right? If what I'm seeing and hearing, if what I'm seeing isn't matching what I'm hearing, then I usually get a red flag up and I slow down and I ask questions. But if what I'm seeing is matching what I'm hearing and what I'm feeling, then I'm more likely to be in a positive mood where I'm sharing and I'm trying to be collaborative and I'm trying to work with people. So just be aware that, again, this is just kind of around that attitude thing, and it's about how you're going into it. Are you going in with an open mind, ready to go, or are you going in very hesitant, in a very risk adverse kind of thing? So just be aware of that. And that's really all the reason I wanted to throw that in there. And then this is just stuff right here. I just talked about it, like just some examples of common problems is that, when you start doing these things, these are common problems that you need to, be thinking of, but you need to find ways to deal with them, right? Like when you look at something over here, you get distracted. Why are you getting distracted? What is it that's distracting you? If you find that your phone, if you can't, if it's just a habit where you're just used to doing your phone, don't bring your phone into a meeting, for example, right? If it's, if you're sitting there, your mind's wandering, that you're missing what the other person say, like, why is it that you're doing that? Maybe bring somebody in, maybe don't take the lead, right? Maybe have somebody, maybe bring a partner and have them take the lead for you, where, you can be there, you can participate, but somebody else is keeping things focused, right? But then also in yourself, what is it that I'm wondering on? Why am I wondering? Maybe I should be a shorter meeting. Maybe I need to work on my agenda. Maybe have a shorter agenda, because if it wanders after a certain amount of time, instead of having an hour-long meeting, keep it 15-minute meetings, right? Just an example. I'm just saying, but where you can adjust the agenda and the number of topics you're talking about so that you don't have a chance to wander. That's another way that you can personally maybe deal with it. If you're starting to judge the other person, then the question is, again, that's where you have situations where you have information sessions, you have somebody else there to help you out. You do it as a tandem, right? Where you have somebody else in the room that takes pieces of things with you to help, so that you're not jumping, down a tangent that's not to your benefit. And where you're working in a team, negotiating a team where you're just part of it is another way to do it. So there's all sorts of things that you can do when you get into this. These are not, I'm not giving you the exact solution. I'm just giving you examples because again, these are some of the typical problems that people have. And I'm just showing that there's different ways. I just wanted to show that there's different ways that you can actually go deal with them. All right. You interrupt the speaker. That one right there. The biggest one is just, give it a count. Like you just got to follow. That one's just more of a discipline thing. Wait till they're done, count 1, 2, boom, and then share. Right. Just have something that's, just figure out something that stops you from doing that. And if the speaker's going off tangent, you understand what they're doing. How are you going to respectfully bring them back into it? So I appreciate that. Thank you for sharing. However, before we can get to that part, I really need to understand this. How do you re-anchor again? And how do you go do that? So just having a way that you can politely do it that doesn't offend anybody, but kind of brings them back into the course. But have some of those things. Think about that. If you've had experience where people go off on tangents, have those things. How am I going to deal with? How am I going to bring them back? Right? And have that decided to ahead of time so that you can do it in a way that doesn't come across as being a jerk, so to speak. So just examples of how you might have some of the common problems, but it really just come down to just analysis. Know yourself, if it's you, and what can you do, and some discipline to make some changes. And with that, we're done a little bit earlier on that one, but I would be happy to take any questions if anybody has any questions.
I need to apologize. I neglected to mention the Q&A function at the beginning. So please, if you have questions, do type them into the Q&A tab at the bottom of the screen. I do have a few though.
Oh,
Hopefully
excellent.
figured out the drill, Rick.
All right.
How do you get the person you are talking to actively listen to you as well?
That one's a tough one. Usually, what I find is that it's hard for people to necessarily do that if they're not used to actively listening. But the way that you can communicate, it comes down to the questions you're asking. Is that by the questions you're again, with the questions you're asking and the response you're getting, and then the follow-up questions you're doing, the idea of the questions is to lead them to a conclusion on their own, what it is you want them to do. Right? Like that's really kind of the sense of what it is that it's kind of like coaching in a way. But what I'm doing is I'm asking the questions, well, how are we going to deal with this? Well, what happened? What about this? And what about this issue? And you keep going, well, how would this work in this? Like you're basically what you're trying to do is you're walking them through the problem so that their conclusion on a solution is closer to what you believe than what they believe. So it's not really getting them to active listen. If they don't want to, if they're not like that, then you know what, they're going to be what it is. But it doesn't. It's more important that you control that conversation, and you do that by the questions you ask and responses you get, and you just kind of you organize your questions in a way that they get them to come to the conclusion where, yeah, you know what, we should be doing something like this. Well, what if we did this then? And then basically that's where you start framing your offer, in a way that kind of reflects the conclusion they've come to, but still meets your needs and wants. But there's no way you can force somebody to actively listen, so to speak, if they don't want to. Like that's not there. So that's where it's using these questions and your preparation, gets them to walk through to where you need them to get to. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, and I think it produced another question.
Right.
If the person is constantly interrupting you, how do you get that to stop respectfully?
Well, that's where that's one of those ones we talked about. You have to show your power on that. And that's where you're gonna have to risk it and say, you might have to, why, why are you interrupting me? Like I really want to come to a conclusion, but this is very frustrating that I keep getting interrupted. Why is that? And am I, have I done something here or whatever, I want to, why is that? Like, what is the issue that you really want to deal with here? So you do gotta, again, you don't want to just get run over if they're constantly doing it all the time. Yeah, call it out. Just go like, what the hell's the matter with you? Like, don't, like, not that way. Just say, I find it very frustrating. You seem to be interrupting quite a bit. Why is that? Like, what is it what's the issue that we need to deal with that's important to you? Like, it seems that there's an issue you really want to deal with. What is that? And, because again, you do have to find out what the reason behind it is. It could just be because they're just rude, but, oftentimes there is something they really want to get to. And sometimes it's frustration that you're not dealing with what their hot button issue is. So, it's okay to call it out. Just be careful of the tone and how you do it. But there's nothing wrong professionally saying like this, hey, you know what? Like, this is very hard when you're constantly interrupting me. You're right. And what can we, what is it? What's the issue here? Like, what is it that, what is the issue you need to deal with, or why are you obviously are upset about something. You're obviously, there's something that's important to you. What is it so we can deal with it so we can move on? So yeah, it's a hard one to do because people are afraid of the response, but you can't keep, if somebody's constantly doing it, if you need to move forward in agreement, you have to deal with it and you have to call it out. Because if you're not prepared to do that, or if it's not something that it's an important deal, then just say, you know what, hey, let's talk again later. And then just don't go back. But if it's an important deal for you, you're gonna have to deal with it because you gotta do a red line somewhere in there. But just be careful of your tone of voice. Be honest. Usually, share how you feel. Like if I'm feeling frustrated because I'm trying to find agreement and constantly being interrupted. And I appreciate that there's probably some issues you want to deal with, and I'd love to deal with them. So maybe we start with that. Like, what would you like to talk about now? Right? So that's a more positive way that you might be able to do it. But you do have to deal with it because if you don't nip it in the bud, it'll be a very frustrating relationship, on and on for, going forward if you don't deal with it. So I hope that helps.
Here's a question that relates to one of your last points. When the other person goes off on a tangent or keeps going off on a tangent, can you share some more examples of how to re-anchor things and get things back to the topic at hand?
Well, there's two ways you can go. And usually in the re-anchoring, it's pretty straightforward. It's recognizing what they're saying. Like, it's not dismissing it. It's thanking them, thank you for sharing that. And yes, that's something we should be talking about. However, right, not but, however, before we go there, I really don't understand how this all fits in. Or how this, and then whatever it happens to be, whatever it is that the point you want to talk to, I'm not sure how this is going to fit into the situation, or I'm not understanding how this is going to work. what can you tell me about this? And then, and what happens, so that's the way to kind of get it back here. And then you acknowledge it, thank them, and say, however, I'm not ready for that because I really don't understand this. What can you tell me about how this is going to work? How are we going to deal with this? How are we going to deal with this issue? And then they have to answer with information. Now they may come back and be resistant, right? They may, like, again, more often than not, I find that yes, they're happy to go that direction and they're ready to go that to let you re-anchor and go talk about it. And then you can come back to but you got to make a note, you do have to come back to the issue. But at that point, you've already got some agreements here, and then it may have taken the steam out of what they're trying to get you over here, what they're talking about. Now, if they insist, well, no, it has to be this. So, okay, I understand. So what about that's important? So why is this important? Why do we need to deal with this one now? Like, why is this more important than this particular issue? And what'll happen is that because there's a roadblock there, and that's the part about jumping to conclusions, is that if you don't deal with it, you're not going to get to an agreement. And so it's nice. I'd rather re-anchor and get back onto the path that I had in mind. But if somebody's adamant they're not, then that's okay. So, okay. So no, that's, understanding how this fits into the big picture makes sense. And what you do is you give them an opportunity to have their say on it and say, okay, well, I'm glad I understand that more now. However, now I think we need to figure out how this fits into these other issues. So how does this fit into this, or what can you tell me about this? So sometimes you might, more often than not, if you re-anchor just as I described, it works and it'll get them there. Just make sure you come back to it, at some point, at least superficially. But if they insist on it, then give them some rope, but then you use the same technique and you bring them back to where you want to go. Because sometimes, it just ends up being they're just so adamant that it's their hot button issue. They want to go, they want to talk about it. But again, it may not be in your best interest to talk about it then. But if they're insistent, then just give them some rope, let them go off. They're going to share a whole bunch. Ask them the questions about to pull out why it's important, why they're doing it, this sort of thing. Make sure you understand how it fits, and then re-anchor it back to where you want to go. Because then you have more information and you know how to filter it in as necessary.
Great, thank you, Rick. The next question is, how could we know your Supply Chain Canada information? For example, your website.
Oh, okay. I can pop that in the chat. That's oh no, there is no chat. What we'll do is Annette, if I don't think so, I imagine you guys can share that with everybody that participated, right? Like how to get a hold of us.
Yes, we certainly can do that, Rick.
Yeah, we can do that. I would have put it in the chat, but we don't have that set up for that. But yes, so Annette can share that with everybody afterwards. And I'm more than happy to have a conversation with anybody that if you have some other questions.
Also, Rick, would you be willing to share a copy of your presentation?
Yep, I will.
Shared a lot of great information today.
Yep, I will send it over to I'll send it over to you, Annette, here right after we're done, and you're more than welcome to share with anybody who participated. Yeah.
That sounds great. Thank you, Rick.
So, no more questions?
I don't see any just now. I think maybe you've overwhelmed everybody with all this great information. I know I'm thinking more and more about how I communicate, so it was an eye-opener for me.
I'll just leave everybody with that thought is just the I'm just gonna maybe stop sharing. I'm gonna stop sharing, right? So basically, I'm just gonna leave everybody thought is just remember that a negotiation just isn't about throwing numbers back and forth. It really is about a relationship and building a trust, and just remember, as people remember how you made them feel, and the more you can focus on all the elements that come into how you interact with people, the more successful your negotiations will be. So good luck with that. If you have questions, Annette will share our information to get a hold of us. And hopefully as we do more of these things, going forward. We'll see some of you guys in person or on virtual classes. So thank you very much, everyone.
Yes, thank you very much, Rick, for all your valuable insight during our series. And thank you all for joining us. Just a reminder, if you do wish to revisit any of this content, you can view the videos on the Manitoba Agriculture YouTube channel on our Business Pathways playlist. And there's a whole variety of other resources and tools there that you might wish to take a look at. As with our previous sessions, you will see a short survey pop up on your screen at the close of this, so please do fill it in. We value your feedback and we do use it to plan future events and develop resources for you. I am just one of a team of business development specialists that are located across the province of Manitoba. We provide customized business consultation and support, training and tools, and have a variety of resources available to you. So if you are interested in getting in contact with us and getting connected to one of our business development specialists, I would encourage you to shoot us an email at mbagrafood@gov.mb.ca. And as Rick has mentioned, we will share his contact information with you as well, so that you can reach out to him if you wish. Thank you for joining us.